DB Cooper, what really happened? Tales from your local time traveler. Okay, let's just get it out of the way. Time travel was invented, more accurately discovered, in 1968 by an Italian scientist who will remain unnamed for the sake of his living family. By 1973, it was unsuccessfully being used by the CIA, KGB, and goodness knows who else. The Russians thought they could go back and win the space race, but found out quick that intervention is impossible. That's the grim secret of time travel. People who time travel back to whenever the hell, unfortunately didn't exist back then. Even if they were technically alive, them as they are when they leave did not exist in the time they go back to. It's impossible to intervene, because you're not really there. You're an observer. Make sense? No? Then you're on the same page as everyone. Why hasn't this technology been used to more accurately report on historical events? Because doing so would put the general public one step closer to learning the truth, that time travel exists. I'm not here today to answer all your burning questions, though. I'm here because I satiated my own ravenous curiosity. When I was a kid, the hunt for DB Cooper was the biggest thing. I mean, the biggest. People talked about it for a while, and the money found a decade later only fanned the flames of speculation. So when I was granted my first solo, recreational trip, I decided to solve the mystery of DB Cooper. Let's give you some backstory for the uneducated. On November 24, 1971, a man going by Dan Cooper boarded a Boeing 747 in Portland, bound for Seattle using a one-way ticket. While in the air, Cooper waved over a flight attendant, and when she sat down, he passed her a note telling her he had a bomb and some demands. He opened his briefcase and showed her what looked like 8 sticks of dynamite attached to a detonator. He wanted the plane emptied in Seattle, $200,000, and 2 parachutes. He then negotiated a refueling destination with the pilot between Seattle and Mexico City. They settled, after a frustrating debate, on Reno, Nevada. To make a very long and complicated story short, Cooper never made it to Mexico City. On the plane's way to Reno, Cooper decided the jig was up, and put on the chute. Contrary to popular belief, Cooper did realize that one of the secondary chutes he was given was a dummy chute. The reason he had requested 2 sets was to fool the authorities into believing he was taking a flight attendant as a hostage. I remember him in the back of the plane, baffled at the audacity of the authorities to give him one dummy secondary chute. They were playing the odds on me taking the dummy, giving her a better chance to live. What a joke. What Cooper didn't know was that the authorities gave him a dummy secondary chute by mistake, not in order to thwart him. It was just a mix-up. Cooper opened up the stairway in the back of the 747, looked into the wind, the clouds, and the terrible rainstorm, and vomited. Threw up right out of the plane. He had jumped out of a plane before. You see, the FBI's assumption that he had military training was correct. Cooper had been in the Air Force for 7 years, and in the National Guard for 3 more. The thing is, in the Air Force, if conditions are as bad as they were on November 24, 1971 over Nevada, the mission was called off, and nobody jumped. Not so for Cooper. He was on his own now, and the chances of him being caught went up by a lot if he was in Reno when the plane refueled. He only wanted the authorities to think he was going there, as a red herring. He wanted to jump in flight, and get away under the cover of night. So Cooper did the only thing he could do. He hid. He feigned jumping to give the cockpit crew something to feel, and make them believe he was no longer aboard, which they did end up reporting to the FBI before landing. Then, he hid. He used the chutes to keep him warm, and hid in the cargo bay of the plane. The FBI will tell you that an armed search conducted thoroughly, by trained men, confirmed Cooper wasn't there. In reality, they had made up their mind he was gone by the time they saw the fuselage. They swept the storage area, but not enough to find Cooper, whose adrenaline kept him more than alert enough to evade the lazy, half-assed search efforts of the 3 agents in the cargo bay. After the fuselage was combed over, and the evidence collected, the plane was brought into a hangar, and kind of forgotten about for a few days. Nobody knew what to do. Was the FBI done with it? Was it to be used again? Nobody knew for a while. and the next night, Cooper escaped with ease. Now, you may be wondering, what about the money? Well, Cooper knew that it would need to appear in every possible way that he had jumped. Using his knowledge of local airways, B made an educated guess as to the flight path, and although he was off, it wasn't by much. He buried part of the money at Tina Bar, then a fishing spot for locals, and buried the chutes in the nearby woods, where they're still undiscovered. He did this to lead the authorities to go on a wild goose chase. He envisioned them dredging the Columbia River for his body, wasting a bunch of time while he got settled in his new life. He then hitchhiked his way back to Portland, where he caught the Greyhound back to his home, never to be seen again. What about the suspects, you ask? None of them are DB Cooper. No, not even the guy who admitted to it. The real Cooper died in a car accident 3 years after the hijacking. Fickle thing, luck. He had hidden the money, and planned to use it as an early retirement fund, but never got the chance. Where is the money? Buried somewhere in the Mojave, believe it or not. What's even more kooky? That guy who took the lawn chair up with the Army surplus weather balloons in the 80s? He landed right near where Cooper buried the money. When he came down, I hear it. You asking, who was he, though? Who was DB Cooper? I'm afraid I can't say. To do so would be not only be a disservice to his legacy, but also, it might fuck up the future a little bit. On the off chance the FBI reads this, they can't figure out who it was yet. That leads to stuff that needs to happen, so letting it out now would mess up a few very entertaining events. With love, your local time traveler.